Video in some formats is recorded using a scheme known as interlacing. In interlaced video, a frame is not captured all at the same time. Rather, a frame is made up of two fields, where each field is captured at the same time, and the two fields are captured one after the other. One field consists of the first horizontal line of pixels, then the third horizontal line of pixels, then the fifth horizontal line of pixels, and so on for all of the odd-numbered lines of pixels. The next field is the second line of pixels, the fourth line of pixels, and so on. When the video is displayed, these two fields are shown one after the other very rapidly, so usually you don't notice that you're seeing an alternation between even and odd-numbered fields. You just see one continuous image. But there are some cases in which, if you don't deal with fields properly in After Effects, you can very much see that they were captured separately. Let's see how this comes up. Here we can see in the project panel that we have a footage item with fields separated, treating lower field as first, and here the PE stands for Preserve Edges. Let's go into the Interpret Footage dialog box to see more information about these settings. I'll right-click, that's Control-click on macOS, and choose Interpret Footage, Main. Here, for fields and pull-down, we see Separate Fields, Lower Field First, and Preserve Edges. Preserve Edges is off by default, but I like to turn it on because it gives better quality on the edges. I'll hit Enter to accept these values. And here we have a footage item that is interpreted differently, where fields are separated, but the upper field is treated as coming first. And here we have a footage item where fields are not separated at all. First, let's look at the correctly interpreted item. I'll open it in the footage panel by double-clicking, and then step through a frame at a time by pressing the Page Up key. Each time I press the Page Up key, the motion moves forward smoothly, with no distortion in the image. This looks fine. I'm now pressing the Page Up key, and everything looks good. Now let's look at the one that was interpreted as upper field first. I'll double-click it to open it in the footage panel. And I'll move the current time indicator back to the same time that we were looking at for the other item. And here, I'll press Page Down, Page Down, Page Down, Page Down. Notice that the motion is jerky, back and forth. That's because this footage item has been misinterpreted. Remember that the upper field and the lower field are captured at different times. So if you interpret the footage item and tell After Effects that the upper field is coming before the lower field, even though in fact it was shot the other way around, you'll get jerky motion like this, where it goes ahead a little bit, and then back a little bit, then ahead a little bit, and back a little bit, because the fields are being played back in the wrong order. Now, this looks bad when I move forward a frame at a time. If I hit the spacebar, it looks a little jerky, but you might not immediately be able to tell what's wrong. So, if what you see is stuttering motion, it may be because fields have been interpreted where upper field is first when it should be lower, or vice versa. Now let's look at an even more visually obvious mistake, which is failing to separate fields at all for interlaced footage. I'll double-click this footage item. And now, even without moving ahead a frame, we can see a problem. Notice we have this combing result here. We have very obvious horizontal lines and jagged edges. I'll move ahead a little bit more in time so that we can see this even more obviously. And right here, you can see these nasty horizontal lines through the car. That's because After Effects has been told to not separate fields. In other words, it's been told that this is not interlaced footage, when in fact it is. So it's not doing what it needs to do with the separate field information, and it's instead treating it as if it's a progressive frame, which it's clearly not. So to fix this, all that we would need to do is right-click, choose Interpret Footage, Main, and then choose Separate Fields, Lower Field First. And notice, as soon as I did that, this image snapped back into the correct appearance. I'll do that again just so that you can see. Off, and Lower Field First. I'll close this box to cancel. And there we're back to the nasty image. When you're working with interlaced footage, if you're doing rotoscoping or using the rotobrush tool, it's a good idea to operate on individual fields. Let's see what I mean by this. Here, we have a composition, the name of which indicates its frame rate. But we can see here that it's 29.97 frames per second. And in it, we have our footage item, which is at 29.97 frames per second also. But we know that it's also 59.94, which is 29.97 times 2. It's at 59.94 fields per second. Now, since we have unique image information on every field, meaning that we have unique image information 59.94 times per second, when doing rotoscoping, we should probably take that into consideration. That's why, here, in this composition, I've set the composition frame rate to be 59.94 frames per second, as you can see here, meaning that on every frame of the composition, it's using the unique image information from each field. So just keep that in mind. If you're doing rotoscoping work on interlaced footage, you should set your composition to twice the frame rate of the footage item, and then when you render out, you'll render out to, in this case, 29.97 frames per second, but then use field rendering to render out unique image information for each field. Let's see how that's done. Go to Composition, Add to Render Queue, and in the render settings, click Best Settings, which is the default, and then for field render, we could switch this to Lower Field First, and now, when we render this out, there will be unique image information on each field, so that this can be shown on a television that uses interlaced video and show up smoothly. I'll click Cancel. Interlacing is not relevant to computer monitors or digital cinema or much high-definition television. It's only relevant for old standard-definition television and some high-definition television. You should certainly not render out fields if you're going to a computer monitor or to a cinema display. But since you may be taking in footage that is interlaced, you do need to know how to work with it. And if you see stuttery motion or combing, the first thing that you should check is the Interpret Footage settings.